Good morning, students. Let's continue with our topic George Orwell's essay Politics and the English Language. In the previous video, we have discussed the first part of the essay, and today I am going to talk about the second part of the essay. In the second section of the essay, Orwell moves on from the politics of writing and focus specifically on political writing itself. He opens with the claim that political writing is actually bad writing, and the cause of this has to do with writers being a mouthpiece for a general party line and not expressing their autonomous opinion. Means the writers, they follow a party line instead of giving their personal opinions on any issue. He claims that to do this in political writing is a rebellious act. Political pamphlets, speeches, etc. have a commonality between different parties. This is that they never have in Orwell's words, a fresh, vivid, homespun turn of speech. Then Orwell develops an image of a political speaker pantomiming the party line. He says that when certain political phrases are repeated, the speaker of these phrases has gone out of their way to render themselves into a form of dummy, curtailing their independent thought so as to reiterate accepted party line. Then further, Orwell's political position begins to emerge at this point, and we see when he says that political speech and writing have become largely a defense of the indefensible. And here we come to understand his view on the implications of the poor language he has been discussing. A pivotal argument arises when he explains the implications of abstract, meaningless language. The indirect aspect and vagueness of political language, Orwell argues, allows for the defense of such things as, I quote, the continuance of British rule in India, the Russian purges and deportations, the dropping of the atom bombs on Japan. All of these can indeed be defended, but only by arguments which are too brutal for most people to face and which do not square with the professed aims of political parties. Unquote. Using concrete descriptive language, he lists the types of atrocities that certain abstract political terms cover up. By using abstract terms in place of concrete or descriptive terms, a political writer is able to obscure the reality of the cause they are defending. I quote, pacification, transfer of populations or rectification of frontiers, elimination of unreliable elements, unquote, are examples of rhetorical abstractions that can be deployed for political purposes without the user taking responsibility for the often violent reality of the processes they are describing. So, in this part of the discussion, Orwell highlights the defense of Soviet totalitarianism, and he examines the style of abstractions used to apologize for Soviet atrocities and ultimately to cover them up. Abstract language, he shows, serves a political agenda by suspending reality from the language of justification. At this stage of the essay, it becomes quite clear that all language is implicated in the problem he is discussing. According to Orwell, I quote, there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. Means all issues are political issues, and politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. When the general atmosphere is bad, language must suffer. So this was his opinion. Then the feedback loop between language and politics exists not only on level of the individual writer, but it pervades the entire political sphere. According to him, a corrupted political atmosphere perpetuates itself through poor language. Even people who should know better, he claims, are implicated. Using slight corruptions or seemingly benign familiar phrases is a weakness that leads to further corrosion of thought. Orwell doesn't exempt himself from these corruptions, and he says that even his essays are likely to bear many of them. The point is not to expect some kind of pure transparency, but honesty is a process, an ongoing effort to question the meaning of one's language and think independently and to contribute original thinking rather than mere repetition. Then he lists the things that a defense of English doesn't have to do with. And what are these? Preserving archaic terms, proper grammar, oversimplifications. Instead, he says that it does have to do with efficiency and clarity, making your language as effective as possible in delivering your meaning. He discusses the process of thinking of an object or idea and attempting to represent that object. And for this, he explains how it's possible to think without language when thinking of a concrete thing. In order to represent that thing, there is typically a process of visualization. And when you think of an abstract idea, language begins to flood your thoughts and can easily swamp and ruin the idea unless you make a conscious effort to mitigate or control the flow. The point here is to be the one in charge of that flow and the terms you use to represent your thoughts rather than the other way round. Then Orwell presents a list of rules to allow the writer to avoid vagueness. So he presents certain rules through which a writer can avoid vagueness or unclarity. Number one is never use a metaphor, simile, or any other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. Means common or overused metaphors or similes should not be used. You should be original in that. Then second is never use a long word where a short one will do. So there is no need to use long words or difficult words. Your language can be simple and you can use short words. Then if it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Means you should be precise, you should be brief. Then never use the passive where you can use the active. Next, never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. So just to give a different look to your language for its ornamentation, don't ever use foreign phrases like Latin or Greek words or hi-fi difficult words. This is not necessary. Then next, break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. So while these rules may seem simple, Orwell says the change in attitude that they entail is not. Then in conclusion, he claims that he is not arguing for a retreat from language or from political struggles. His main point in this essay is to draw attention to the connection between political chaos and the decay of language, how they are connected. His essay is also about resisting orthodoxies. He concludes that political language of all types, I quote, is designed to make lies sound truthful okay, and murder appear respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind, unquote. So Orwell ends his essay where he began by arguing for the importance of the effort to resist corrupt language. And what he suggests, that one should try to be precise, to be clear in his thoughts, and should try to think originally. So that's all, students, for today. This is the summary or the explanation of the second section of the essay, and tomorrow we'll analyze this second section, and further we will proceed tomorrow. So for today, that's all. Thank you.